Hey everyone, this is Danielle from the Great Lakes Beacon. I'm here with Abdul El-Sayed. He is a candidate for governor in 2018. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it into our office, but he was gracious enough to allow us to some time out here in East Lansing. So thank you, Abdul, so much. I appreciate it.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
So maybe let's start with just tell me why you decided to run for governor.
Well, look, I was rebuilding the health department in Detroit that had been shut down when our city was facing bankruptcy and state takeover. We rebuilt it around the well-being of kids, doing things like giving kids access to glasses delivered for free at school so they could see the blackboard. We stood up to some of the biggest corporate polluters in our state. When a Marathon Petroleum refinery in Southwest wanted to increase its emissions of sulfur dioxide, we stood up to them. We forced them to invest $10 million of their own money to reduce their emissions overall. And then we heard about Flint, and when we heard about Flint, we realized there was a responsibility to act locally. We had every single school, daycare, and Head Start tested for lead in the water. We tested 360 schools in 6 months, created a protocol that is now model practice nationwide. But I'll tell you, that put me in a position where I realized that this system of state government that had shut down my health department, that has now poisoned kids in Flint, this system of government as business has failed us. It's not just public health. It's the fact that our public schools used to be among the best in the country. Today, we are number 50 out of 50 in terms of educational outcomes over the past 8 years and improvements. It's the fact that we sit on 21% of the world's fresh water, and yet we're told we can either have our economy or we can have our environment, but we can't have both. It's the fact that too many people are threatened to lose their health care day in and day out, and there's a responsibility for state government to support that. There's a lot of work we need to do, and I realized in that moment that I needed to stand up, that we needed leadership, and that together, if we're willing to see beyond the differences, this culture of fear in this moment that's told us that we can't see eye to eye with people who see the world differently than we do, we're not going to be able to solve our challenges. And I believe that we can, and I believe we should, and that's the reason I'm running.
So for those that don't know, can you give us a little bit about your background, where you come from, what you've done?
Yeah, so I was born and raised here in Michigan. I come from a really uncommon family. My father was an immigrant from Alexandria, Egypt. He was the child of a vegetable salesman and an illiterate homemaker who grew up in the fish market in Alexandria. He came here to do a PhD in the late 70s, went to Wayne State University in Detroit, and he met and married my stepmom who raised me. She was born and raised in a place called Gratiot County, which is just north of Lansing, and her family's been in this part of the world since before the Revolutionary War. So I was raised in the household built by Muhammad and Jackie, and so it gives me a really sort of diverse perspective on the diversity of this state. I went to Michigan as an undergraduate to study biology and politics. I went to Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar to do my PhD in public health. I went to Columbia University to do an MD, so I'm a physician. I spent some time as an educator where I was a professor in public health, and then ultimately came back home to rebuild the health department. So my work has been as a physician, as an educator, and as a public servant. And I think that gives me a set of skills that's unique to public service, around solving real problems and doing the kind of operational work that oftentimes folks who have an experience as a legislator or no experience at all in government have missed out on, right? I know the day-to-day of operating a large health department in one of the poorest cities in America, having rebuilt it from a 5-person, 85 contractor institution to 220 overall, 5 campuses, building programs across the board. We talked about some of the ones that we've built, but then it also meant doing things like revolutionizing the way we do animal control, moving into a new animal shelter, reducing our dog bites numbers nearly 30%, and improving the number of dogs that would find a forever home from just over 14% to 67% after I was done with the work there.
So if elected, what are the top 3 policy goals that you'd like to accomplish?
Yeah, so in Michigan right now, too many people are locked out of their economy. We have to create jobs, and we have to create the kind of jobs that are resistant to being offshored or automated, right? And so we have to orient all the work of the economy into thinking about creating the kinds of jobs all over the state that are here to stay. We also have to fix the fact that our government is not transparent, it's not accountable. And we have to do the work that it takes to make sure that we're holding our lawmakers and our governor accountable, that they're exposed to the same Freedom of Information Act accountabilities as other states, that our state is not gerrymandered, cut up like a Thanksgiving turkey, and that no corporation can buy out our state government because they can invest 4 times as much in a state legislative race than they can in a federal legislative race. And then we have to fix education in this state. Right now, like I said, I went to public schools my whole life. I didn't go to a private school until they paid me to do it when I went overseas. And I'll tell you that the kind of education that I got in my public school is very different than what kids are getting now. We have fundamentally disinvested. We have created a system where too many people can profiteer via a charter school mechanism that's just not held accountable. And we have to fix that. So, it's worse in places like Detroit and Flint and Benton Harbor, but it's also not very good in places like Kalkaska or Houghton. And I think the work of being able to rebuild is really important. And then lastly for me, if you'll give me 1/4, is right now as, unfortunately lawmakers in D.C. who are bought out by corporations are playing fast and loose with our health care. We have to figure out how as a state we can guarantee 10 million people access to affordable, equitable, and accessible health care that they can count on here in the state of Michigan.
And so I guess what makes you different from your opponents then?
I think a couple of things. Number one, we're here at a canvas launch. We are actively knocking doors because this is not just a campaign, it's a movement. And it's a movement of people who care about their democracy. You see most of these folks here under the age of 35. And when folks are asking, where are all the millennials? Well, they're right here. And so I bring that kind of youth and enthusiasm to government.
Right.
I also have real operational experience in government, which is something nobody else has. Voting on bills is not the same thing as making sure that you're delivering operations in a streamlined way to a city of 680,000, and I offer that. I also have the skill set of a physician and a scientist, somebody who's actually worked in spaces that are not simply focused on the backdoor politics or the backroom politics of Lansing. And then, I'm an outsider. I was never supposed to run for office, and I only decided that I would run in a moment where I watched as state government was fundamentally failing us. And in this moment today, we have to ask ourselves, what is the kind of government we want? Do we want the same the same bought and sold politicians, the same folks who tell us that because they've run businesses that somehow they know how to run government, or do we want folks who've been leaders in government before and have a fresh perspective and a real orientation to be able to care for real people?
You had touched on it a little bit. What would be your plan for ensuring residents in urban cities like Detroit and Flint have a good quality of life? Obviously, you have the Flint water crisis, you have a Detroit foreclosure crisis, water shutoffs in Detroit. What kind of agenda, I guess, if you will, would you have for those urban centers of Michigan?
Yeah. So I come from the city of Detroit, and that's where I did my work. I understand the challenges there exceedingly well. And to me, it starts with, number one, making sure that our education and public health opportunities are secure, right? It is a shame what has happened in Detroit public schools, and we're failing a whole generation of young people. And so we have to fix our schools first and foremost. We have to figure out how it is that we make sure that our kids are going to school in safe and healthy environments. We have to make sure that their curricula are just as good as anywhere else because we're investing in that education. We have to make sure that they have access to basic things like good food, good housing, and clean water. I think the shutoff crisis in Detroit is a shame. I did everything I could as health director to address it, and I know that as governor, I'm going to have the inside track to be able to address the legislation right now that makes water unaffordable for too many people. And then I think it's about being able to create meaningful, long-lasting, high-quality jobs that are not going to get offshored or automated, not going to get sent off to Mexico, not going to be taken over by a robot. If we can do those things, then there is a pathway forward. We have to make sure that the growth in those cities is not just focused on, the downtowns and midtowns, but also is equitable and that everybody has access to the rising tide.
You've mentioned education a lot, obviously. One of our Facebook followers, we asked them what they would ask the candidates, and his question was, how would you improve charter school accountability? Yeah, well, first and foremost, we need local control. And right now, you have a couple of institutions that can approve a charter school that have no sense of what's happening on the ground locally. So we have to have some level of local control. The second thing is that I don't believe anybody should be able to profiteer off of public education. The dollars that you and I pay in taxes for our children's education shouldn't go into lining somebody's pockets. So I think there needs to be an off-ramp from private charter schools. And then what we need to be able to do
is equip public schools to be able to compete. And the problem that a lot of public schools have is that particularly in low-income communities that have seen a net loss of population over time, they're saddled with these buildings they can't actually take care of. And I think there's an opportunity for a state-level land bank that could buy out some of these schools and then infuse the local school district with the capital to be able to invest in improving the buildings that they actually do use.
Right. And then another question from our Facebook follower, or a Facebook follower, I should say. How would you bring together Democrats? Obviously, this last election saw folks kind of have a divide. Where do you see your role in that?
Look, we need to tell people what we are going to do rather than what we're not going to do. We need to tell them who we are rather than who we're not. Right. And it's obvious who we're not, right? But it's not clear who we are. And my message has entirely been about the opportunity that we have to invest in people, to solve real problems, to build a future we all want to believe in. That work of getting out there, of talking about that with anyone and everyone, of having the real conversations that matter today, that's the work that we're doing. And that to me is what's going to unify our party, right? And I've made a commitment that I will support the Democratic nominee for governor, regardless of who they are, because I think that we, at this point, need to come together around a set of values. But I also know that I'm articulating that set of values better than anyone else. It's the reason we have people out here right now giving up their afternoon to come and talk to people about what we offer. And we need a message that unites, and that's what we're talking about.
A couple policy issues before we wind up here. What is your position on prevailing wage?
Yeah, so I think we need to protect it. It is really important that we protect the quality and technical expertise of the workers who are doing work. And what prevailing wage is meant to do is to make sure that any contract that's issued by a public organization is issued such that we're making sure that we're paying what is going wage that is often union negotiated. And what that does is it makes sure that we have the technical expertise to be able to do that work effectively, efficiently, and safely. And so I stand in line with it.
And I think a lot of folks know this who may have followed you, but single-payer health care.
Yeah, I will do everything I can to lobby the federal government toward a Medicare for All policy. And toward the end of what I can do as governor, I will do my best to enact a single-payer system for Michigan if we cannot do it federally. To me, I'm the only person in this race who's ever sat across the bedside from somebody who's struggling to pay for their health care. I know the pain of that for folks, and I know that too many people in Michigan, even today, suffer that. And there's a responsibility for us to act.
And I think that actually is all of our questions. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Really good to meet you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.